So, I know, it's been a minute since I put out another episode. I guess I was kind of down for spiritual maintenance, kind of going through a dark night of the soul, you could say, and being attacked by allergies, the pollen, and Mercury retrograde. I think that's everything. So yeah, a lot of things have been going on since the last episode that I recorded. But kind of coming out of that dark forest, that dark night of the soul, I'm starting to see the sunrise. So here I am, back at it. So the topic of discussion today is kind of looking at when I was going through my dark night of the soul, walking through this dense forest of my ego. There was a lot of self-reflection that was going on and a lot of self-awareness that was going on that led me to do this podcast. So the title of this podcast is Positional Awareness. What does that mean? What is positional awareness? This is basically looking at people's positions in your life and the roles they play for you and for their, ascension, their benefit. Because my podcast typically focused around relationships, I'm going to keep it focused around relationships, but this can pretty much cover any connection or relation in your life, okay? So, positional awareness, what does that mean? Well, in the easiest sense, it's kind of like, and I know people, well, not people, but individuals have told me, I look at relationships like I look at jobs or running a business. And because I have done that, it's kind of difficult for me to separate the two at times, but sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes it's not a great thing, right? I can't, well, I guess it really depends on how you look at it. But for this example, it's a good thing. So if you're running a business, or not even running a business, say you are the boss, the supervisor, the hiring agent at your agency, and you see someone who you feel has the potential to fill a position, even though on their resume, even though in their historical experiences when it comes to jobs, they've never done this or learned the technique or tools or knowledge to complete that position, you say, I see the potential in this person and I feel that they can, so you put them in that higher position anyway. And then they don't perform. And even though you notice that they're not performing, you make it known to them, like, we need to do this isn't working, this, that, and the other, but you still keep them in that position. So then the question comes, when they leave the job or you have to terminate, whose fault was it in the first place that they were placed in that position? Even if they asked, even if they said, yeah, I can do this. Yeah, I might not have done it before. I might not have the qualifications. I might not have the capacity. But yeah, I can do this. So you put them in that position. And you start to notice that, maybe not. And this doesn't even go, this can also go with the individuals who falsify their resume, who say, yeah, I've done this before. Yeah, it's on my resume, right? So you put them in that position. And then you start to see with their skill set, it's not really who they are. Yet you keep them there. So then the question becomes, whose fault is it when the person has to be terminated or quits the job, leaving another opening at your agency? So most people who have a business mind in HR issues and this, that, and the other are going to say, of course, it's my fault. I should not have put them in that position. I knew they weren't ready. I knew they did not have the capacity to do what was required for that position. And even though I had a vision of what this person could do, in actuality, they could not do it, yet I let them stay. This is what we see a lot of times in relationships, right? You meet somebody. Of course, when you meet somebody, it's kind of like the resume, right? It's kind of like that interview. They're putting on their presentation. They're putting on their show. This is what I can do for you. This is what I bring to the table. This is who I am. And even though historically, if you ask the right questions, right? So some individuals don't even ask the right questions. Like, what was the longest relationship you've had? Or what were some of the reasons why some of your relationships in the past have failed? And, what are you looking for in a relationship? The same type of questions you would ask for somebody at an interview for a job. Because you want to be able to know that you can support that person's expectations as well as you. So you go through the interview phase, which we call the infatuation phase, right? The honeymoon phase, everything looks amazing. But then we put the rubber to the road, and that's where we start to see if this person is all that they said they are, or was there, were we living in a space of perception? Were we living in a space of potential and not reality? Because you can see the potential in somebody all day. If they do not see it, if they cannot feel it, if they cannot step into that, it doesn't exist. All that potential does not exist because they don't have the capacity to do so. Is that person's fault? No. You're the one, or in this example, has this great vision, right? You are the one who has this perception, but you can't force what you see of somebody on them if they don't see it themselves. Again, if you see somebody who has amazing potential, you see somebody who has great things, who can do great things, if they don't see it in themselves, it doesn't matter what you see. We can't force somebody into their greatness when they're not ready to achieve it. We can, support them. We can encourage, but we can't make them be great. Now, how does that translate over from work and business into relationships? It's the same situation. You meet somebody, you feel that, okay, we match, we click, I can see this going really, really far. And they might even say that up front too. Yeah, we match, we click, I can see this going really, really far. But it's not until the rubber meets the road. It's not until the relationship is put into situations and circumstances to see if this person does have the capacity. Okay? Am I putting somebody next to me at my throne as a king when their capacity level is a page? Where their capacity level is a jester of the court? Even though we might see the greatness in them, even though we might see them sitting at the throne next to us, they're still thinking in the mindset of a peasant in the village. So what happens? Sooner or later, that king or queen, depending on, your situation, that you've placed in this position of power within your life, within your existence, within your experience, sooner or later, they're going to go back or start to present qualities that is their max capacity. Meaning, if their max capacity is the jester of the court, that's who they're going to be. Regardless of who you think they should be, regardless of who you feel they should be, regardless of who you see in them, they can only perform at who they are. Again, regardless of what you see in them, they can only be who they have the capacity to be. Now, when you start to see this, some people, it could really range. Some people will say, well, I'm going to encourage, I'm going to support, I'm going to make this person see the greatness in themselves. Does that work? Sometimes it could possibly work. There's probably somebody out here listening and saying, yeah, that was my situation. I saw the greatness in him and her, and he didn't see it in himself or herself. So I just kept on encouraging and supporting. And yes, they were able to step into their greatness. And if that's your story, that's outstanding. That's wonderful. But that's not the common experience. A lot of times, the person who sees this person or places this person at a higher level, at a higher position that somebody is not emotionally qualified for, there's going to be some pain, some hurt. Now, true, complete transparency. Sometimes the person placing the individual in a higher position, they're doing it not necessarily because they see potential in the other person. It's because they're lacking something themselves, so they're trying to get it from another individual. So this conversation, this podcast could be very layered because that is definitely a possibility. So if you're lacking something within yourself, do you honestly know what it would look like when it presents itself? Okay. If you're lacking... Let's do a good one. If you're lacking vulnerability within yourself, and I picked that example because that's something that I have challenges with. So if you're lacking vulnerability within yourself, if the person you're in a relationship with shows it to you, are you going to be able to recognize it? And if this person shows it to you in a way that's different from what you feel it is, do you penalize them for that? So there's a lot of different things to look at when you're looking at emotional positions, right, in your life, in relationships, and the emotional capacity to fill these positions. You have to be very honest with yourself. What am I looking for in a partner? What are they looking for in a partner? These are things that have to be, discussed in the front end. Because you don't want to go halfway down the road and then look to your passenger side and realize that the person who's supposed to be sitting in front of you is on the side of the road miles back because they couldn't keep up. Or you're looking for something externally that can only be fulfilled internally. So the challenge here is to kind of be honest with yourself, but be honest with the capacity of who your mate is. Be honest with the position that you've placed this person in, and be honest with if you feel, this is a situation of growth, or is this a situation of hiding behind somebody else so you don't have to do the work? It's so much easier to focus on somebody else and their challenges so you don't have to focus on your own. And, that was difficult. That was a difficult experience for me because it's having to be very transparent about where your ego is needy. Okay? And where your ego is needy, it's going to give you narratives that keep you in a position of need. Because one thing the ego does not want to do is to be evacuated or evicted from who you are. The ego wants to stay there. Now, the ego does have a reason, right? It's protection. But protection exactly from what? And for everybody, that situation is going to be different. Looking at the throne. I use the throne because it's taken me a while to step into this space of not just queendom, but empress energy, which is composing of all elements, right? And it's not something that I'm willing to settle with at this point for someone who can't meet me at all levels, who I know is my equal, is my partner, who won't get off the throne and revert back to ways that I find not to be acceptable for me personally. Now, everybody has their, the military is about to come out of me, but everybody has their rules of engagement. Okay. And a lot of people, I'm drinking tea, so you guys might hear the tea. If you're drinking tea, this is a great time to take a break and sip some tea. So, rules of engagement. Now, I might have talked about titles and labels before, but labels and titles are ways humans compartmentalize things, right? So sometimes you'll hear people say, well, I don't like titles and relationships, this, that, and the other. I'm going to be very honest. I like titles because it gives me my rules of engagement. If I'm in a committed, exclusive relationship, there's rules of engagement for me to feel safe and secure. And safety is paramount in any type of relationship. If you do not feel safe in a relationship, any type of safety, emotionally, physically, spiritually, psychologically, the relationship is going to be a challenge, right? So safety has to be there. So rules of engagement are important because it gives you kind of the boundaries that you're willing, that you want to protect. And if you think about a queendom, it's like the boundaries of your area, what you're willing to let come in and what you're not willing to let come in. So you have to be very careful on who you've allowed to be on the other side of that boundary with you. And you have to be very transparent on where your challenges are within the ego to not feel that the partner is supposed to be picking up the slack in a sense of, I'm not a vulnerable person, so can you do that for the both of us? Doesn't work that way. Now, picking up the slack, absolutely, in the sense of today I'm just not feeling myself, so you're going to have to step it up when it comes to responsibilities within the home, within the relationship. That's different. But I'm talking about an elemental aspect of the relationship that is the foundation. Looking for someone else to fulfill that because you haven't worked on that area is going to be a challenge. It will create a war inside your boundary area. So let's look at it as if you have your kingdom, queendom, you're dumb. So you have this. It's to you, it's what it needs to be. You have somebody come to the boundary of your kingdom, knocking on the door, the gates, whatever's the boundary, right? For me, my queendom will be an island. And the person would have to come up in a boat, a ship, whatever. It's going to be my determination if I'm going to let this person across that boundary. Am I going to let this person across that wall? What are your requirements to let somebody in? So this is some homework for you. This is an assignment. Okay. I might even make some worksheets for this. All right. What are the requirements for you to let somebody into your kingdom? And you need to be very specific about this. Not vaguely say, oh, I just want somebody to make me feel like a woman. I mean, that's nice and all, but let's be more specific. I need responsiveness. When I text, I need to know that you've received it and not within 3 to 5 business days. Okay. I need consistency. I don't need you to be hot every 2 days and then disappear 3 to 4 days. I need you to be aware of who I am. And in return, be able to provide that same information back to the person. These things have to be addressed before you allow this person into your kingdom. or kingdom or island. Because once they're in it, once you become emotionally vested in a relationship, it's much harder to keep somebody out who is not your equal, your match, being equally yoked. It's much harder to keep those individuals out than once they're on the other side to get them out. Once you've crossed that line of emotional investment, it's really difficult. So once you've had this discussion, and these discussions need to happen in the front end. Now, there are some issues where somebody can backdoor the situation. A lot of times this happens when you have history with this person's an ex. So the visual for that is they might know a back door. They don't have to come to the front door because they have the key to the back door. And they're like, hey, surprise, I'm back. Or hey, surprise, remember me. You still have to stop and have these conversations and not get wrapped up into the feeling of comfort because it's something that you recognize. It's something that you know. Okay? Even if the relationship ended crappy, there's still going to be a sense of recognition that has your guard a little bit more lax than it would be for a stranger, right? Even if you've had horrible times, if you were in a relationship with somebody for any period of time, there's going to be positive times too. And that's going to be some of the area that internally you're going to recognize, and it's going to lax your boundaries. So you might not ask the questions that you would ask somebody who you've never met, but you have to. Okay? And this is really important for you all who are online dating as well. That's tons of people coming to your boundary, coming to your gates, coming up to the island, wanting to get in. It's then and there you can ask these questions, and if these people are not worth your time, energy, and effort, then stop. Don't breadcrumb. Don't lead somebody on. Just stop, because what that does is when you allow somebody access to your energy, even if you have not allowed them on the other side of your boundary into your kingdom, they still have access to your energy, and that still can cause issues. So again, you want to make sure with rules of engagement, right, that you know exactly what your expectations are, but also what they are expecting of you. So we're flipping it now. So once you've given them their expectations, if they come to you and say, okay, well, or you might need to ask. What are your expectations in a relationship? Or what are your expectations with this connection? And see what they say. Like if somebody told me, I need to video chat with you 3 times a day. For me, that's not something I want to do. It's not. I don't know. I mean, I'm not like super duper old at all. But at the same time, I just don't feel the need to stare at your face when I'm talking, because I could be doing so many other things at the same time. And I know some people are like, well, you're not being present. You're not giving them the information that they need. Look, if you're here with me, I'm going to give you direct eye contact. We're going to talk. We're going to have a conversation. It's harder for me on the phone because it's like I'm staring at a screen talking to you, and it's just not my thing. But if it's important to somebody else, that's something that has to be discussed. So if this person was already on the boundary, or I've already allowed them on my island, I'll be more willing to discuss it, because obviously I've already felt the relationship, the connection is something that is valid and important enough for you to be, in my kingdom with me. But if you're brand new and you're like, look, straight off the bat, I need this video chat with you 3 times a day, an hour each time, that's not going to be something I'm going to do. But I'm going to be very honest about that. I'll text you all day. And it's just who I am as a person. Texting is first, conversation is second. Video chatting, we're going to have to schedule that a heck of a long time in advance, because, I have to be ready for that. You got to, be ready for that. But for some people, they prefer video chatting versus texting in voice conversation. So these are the conversations, and even though it sounds minor, these can be a big deal moving forward. Like for me, like I said earlier, responsiveness with text messaging. When I send a text and I know you have your phone like on you all the time, I expect to have a response within some hours of receiving the text or sending the text. And your lack of responsiveness is disrespectful to me because it feels like a form of rejection, which I know rejection is one of my core wounds, right? So it triggers that. But that's something that's important to me to feel safe in a relationship. And that's what makes sense. So for somebody of video chatting 3 times a week, I mean, I might be able to do 3 times a week, but not 3 times a day. But if video chatting 3 times a day is something that is required for that person to feel safe in the relationship, then I might not be the person that they're going to want to vibe with. But again, that's all determined before they're allowed on the other side of your boundary. Now, we talked about boundaries, rules of engagement, and emotional capacity, positional emotional capacity. I just wanted to come on here really quick to talk about this because I see a lot of this in my clients. I see a lot of this in individuals I work with, and even in myself. You really can't base a relationship on potential because potential is not fact. Okay? So I'm going to say this again. Saying it again for emphasis. After I drink some tea. So let's take a break. We'll sip on some tea. You cannot base a relationship on potential because potential is not fact. Can you build a relationship on potential? Yeah, possibly. But it depends on how realistic your potential is. Like, if I look at you and say, you have the potential to be the next Bill Gates. I see it in you, and I know we're going to be this rich, and I know we're going to do this within the next 12 weeks because I just see your drive and determination. You're going to be the next major mogul who develops this amazing app that saves the world. Like, I see this, so let's do it. So you have all the fire and drive and the determination, but your partner's like on a whole nother kick. They have no desire to do that. They know nothing about applications. Like, dude, they're bagging bags at Walmart, which is nothing wrong with that. What I'm showing is the ways you have to ensure you have a reasonable potential, expectation, desire, right? And not place something that's unattainable on your partner and then blame them when they can't deliver. Now we're about to get a little deep. So I'm going to pause for a second. Again, you have to be clear on what your expectation is in the relationship and what you want in a partner to ensure that you're not placing unattainable requirements on somebody who does not have the capacity to do it, or they just don't want to, right? They can have the capacity all day. They might not want to do it. Either way, you can't control somebody else's desire. You can't control somebody else's determination. You can't control somebody else to do what you feel they have the ability to do. So let's take it away from money-making, mogul, app-building examples and put it into an emotional aspect. You can't really expect somebody to love you unconditionally in a way where you feel safe, validated, and heard if that person does not have the capacity to do so. What does that mean? If you are your person that come from a place of pain, trauma, just not being able to fulfill or step into those spaces of vulnerability, of unconditional love, of communication, because they were never shown it, then that's going to be a challenge. If you are looking for a partner who is that you want them to express, communicate, to not always communicate in a fight, in an argument, but that person has been brought up in that environment where that's all they know, chaos is an expression of love for them, you're gonna have some challenges. So that's why you have to do your due diligence when you're looking at long-term partnership, when you are trying to find someone to sit beside you in your throne. Now, are relationships meant for healing? Yes. So if many of you don't know, I am in the process of writing a book called Traumatized in Love, and it's going to be focused on how trauma impacts intimate partner relationships. But one thing that we absolutely know is you can't use a relationship to fix you. You can't use a relationship to fix your individual trauma. Relationships could facilitate it, absolutely. So I'm not saying don't have relationships when you're hurting. I'm not saying that at all. And there is a train of thought or a mindset out there that if you're healing, if you're hurting, you shouldn't be in a relationship because you're going to bleed all over the other person, this, that, and the other. There's some factual information around that train of thought, but relationships can actually facilitate healing. What does that mean? So, an example. You put somebody in the position of my king, okay? For me, because my partner would be a king, I'm using terminology of such as it relates to me. You can fill in whatever you fill in for your relationship. So I put somebody in that position, right? They might not have been qualified for the position, but I saw potential. I see potential in this person. We click, we this, that, and the other. This person is my person. This person is going to be sitting next to me on my throne, and we are going to build an empire together. That's going on in my head. Now, is that going on in the king's head or the assigned king's head? No. I don't even think, and this is for this example, that they're wanting that title, right? And that's another thing you have to be aware of. Do they even want to be the king? They might just want to be the dude who comes in on the cover of night, sneaks into the castle when the king's not looking, right? So you really have to be mindful of who you're putting in these positions. But I digress. Moving forward, I made him my king. Okay. Noticing, he doesn't have the emotional capacity for this position. Noticing that kind of early on, but saying, you know what? I can fix this. I can make myself weaker. I can make myself not as vocal. I can make myself more vulnerable to where he feels like he has more power. So then he'll play his role. That's not the way to do it. You don't lessen who you are. You don't change who you are to maintain a relationship. If you can't be who you are authentically, if you can't be who you are at 100%, then that relationship is not for you. I'm not saying it's not for you forever. It just might not be for you right now. But if you feel like you have to lessen who you are to make that person feel better about themselves, greater about themselves, oh, now I feel like the king because she will stop talking. It's not the time or place for this connection. Okay? So, looking deeper into the situation, right? Now you realize maybe this is not the person who's meant to sit next to you in the throne. But you keep moving forward because you're comfortable now. You're comfortable. You've gotten into the routine of what this relationship is. But you lose yourself in the process. Okay? And then you start to notice that, yeah, I know, he's showing me signs that he's not the king that I thought he was. But now he's starting to act out in ways where his emotional capacity is. And for every example, that could be different. But the question is, when looking at yourself, again, everybody's healing. Life is traumatic. Okay? However you look at it, it's a traumatic experience. We come to the planet to learn lessons. And many a times, lessons that are learned don't feel good. So relationships can help facilitate the learning. Lessons can help facilitate the healing, but the work has to be done from the individual. Okay? So when I make this statement that you can't look for your healing in somebody else, you can't look for your healing in a relationship, you can't look for a healing in external experiences, because the work has to be done from you. And that's an internal process. All of these examples can help facilitate it. So, back to my example on my island. I have my king next to me in my throne, who now I've noticed, maybe I gave him a position he wasn't ready for, or that maybe he didn't even want. I might need to look at myself to see why I did that. Woof. Enter dark night of the soul. And I have to stir my tea on this one. So the question for you, why would you put somebody in a position that you know they are not emotionally qualified for? I'll wait. Give you some time to think about that. For me, it's because I was looking for safety. I'm looking for validation. I'm looking for a way to understand these new emotions I'm feeling. Okay, so yeah, he might not be emotionally providing what I need, but I feel safe around him because I have a trauma of abuse. Abuse is a trauma of mine, right? I feel validated around him because he might not return my calls, or he might not text when I want him to, but he gets around to it. And yeah, he wants to see me sometimes. I feel validated, right? I'm like, I'm cool. Okay. Once every 2 to 3 months. Yeah, really. So it was looking at who I was and why I was okay with accepting peasant behaviors from who I was calling my king. Wow, that was heavy. Hopefully he'll never listen to this podcast. I'm joking. I could care less. He needs to know. But I was accepting behaviors of the jester in my king. And as long as you accept the behaviors of the jester, you'll never get the behaviors of the king. They have no reason to step up. But here's the rub. So, what if you have somebody who just does not have the emotional capacity, who just says, look, I want to be at king level. I want to be your king. I want to sit next to you on the throne. But my emotional capacity, my life at the moment, whatever, I can only give you this. That is when you have to make the determination on what you're going to be willing to accept. So let's flip it back to work. Let's flip it back to job. It's like an employee coming to you. You've put them in the position of a director, but they're performing like they are an intern who's never worked at a site in their life. And they come to you and they say, I really want to be a director. I know I can do this. Let me do this. Do not count me out. How do you handle that? Same thing. I'm a firm believer in people's actions, what they do, right? That cliche, actions speak louder than words. That is so true. Words are very important. They direct your path. They direct your motivation. So them verbalizing it is important. But if there's no actions behind the verbally stating this, then again, that's a question that you'll have to determine to say, yeah, I hear you, but I'm not seeing you. I don't see where your actions are matching with your words. And sometimes you can get in a cycle of that where the person's like, I can do this, let me do it, let me do this, let me give me another chance, this, that, and the other. And they attempt it, and it might work for about a week or so, but then they regress right back to who they were, because that is who they are. That is who they are. And if somebody's trying to make a change for somebody else, it's never going to be long term. That change has to be for the person. I work with victims of domestic violence, and I get that question a lot. Do you think he will change? Do you think she will change? And I can't say yes or no, because I'm not that individual. If the person is making a change to satisfy a requirement from the court, to satisfy a requirement to stay in a relationship, they might change, but 9 out of 10 is going to be temporary, and they're going to revert to who they are. If they're making the change for themselves, if they've had an awareness, awakening, a time in their life where they're tired of living the way they are, and they make the change for themselves, then yes, absolutely. That's the change that's long term. So like I was saying before, I don't want anybody to listen to this and say, oh, I'm never going to be with this person because they're never going to change, or this, that, and the other, or da-da-da-da-da. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is you have to be the guard of your gate, right? Allowing any and everybody in just based on potential, allowing any and everybody in just based on a feeling, allowing any and everybody in because you feel that this person is king status. You have to have more concrete and specific information, because at the end of the day, you're going to be the one who has to make the choice if you're going to allow a relationship to continue, or you rather just rule your kingdom on your own until the worthy king arrives at the gate. And either way, you'll still have to do the questions. So you've got a couple of assignments in here, right? How do you know, or what are your expectations in a relationship? You know, what are the expectations you feel you can meet at who you're giving positions to? And if they can fulfill those positions, and if you can fill the positions that they're giving you. Because all of this works in reverse. If somebody's putting you in a position of you're their queen, and again, I'm using terms for my example, but you feel that you don't have the emotional capacity for whatever reason. You're working on yourself, you're doing your own thing, you don't have the time, the energy, the effort, the desire to be very upfront about that. And with being upfront, honest, clear communication, you know, sometimes you get information that might not feel so good, right? And the challenge around that, you know, how do you handle information when you are being upfront, when you are being honest? The information you have to give somebody or the information you have to receive, you know, that also is a test of ego. So, yeah, you know, relationships are important in the facilitating of healing, in the facilitating of growth, because how do you know you're making positive changes if you're not put in positions to test out, you know, what you've learned? How do you know you need to make changes or you need to grow unless you're put in positions that trigger or touch points that need to be healed? So absolutely, relationships are important. absolutely you want to go into relationships with an awareness. So I'm definitely not someone who says wait till you're 100% healed before you decide to date or go back out there. I'm somebody who says be aware of where your shortcomings are, be aware of what your triggers are, be aware of the areas you need to work on, and be upfront and transparent about that with whomever you are placing in a position of your life in relationships. That relationship might be the healing factor you need to accomplish what's needed for you and also for the other individual. Okay. So that kind of concludes everything. Like I said, there are a couple of assignments there. I might throw some worksheets out so you can do some worksheets there to kind of just dig down and unpackage some of this information, because if you have found yourself in situations where you've given somebody a much higher position than they were emotionally ready for, or they had the emotional capacity to do, and this is a trend for you, it's time to start looking at what's going on with you, right? If it's a one-time thing, stuff happens. But if you're seeing a cycle, if you're seeing a repetitive nature or quality that you're having or doing, that's when it's time to look at yourself internally, just to make sure you're not trying to use external experiences and relationships to heal things that are going on within you. So hopefully this helped. Let me know in the comment section. Send me an email. Check out the website. And I look forward to hearing your feedback. You guys take care. Bye.